Okay. All right, now we go.
Sweep.
All right, everybody, welcome back. It is Wednesday. That means it's time to talk NFL football, and we are going to do that right here on the NautZone, brought to you by Sportsnaut.com. If you haven't gone up to see Sportsnaut.com, what are you doing? What are you waiting for? You want all your sports news, that's where you need to go, especially if you're a big football head like me. I am Scott Gulbransen, one of your hosts, and my co-host is Ryan Dyrud. Ryan from the LA Football Network. You can follow him on x.com at Ryan Dyrud. LAFB, and I am at LV Gully. And Sportsnaut is Sportsnaut, as in Juggernaut, N-A-U-T. So there you go, not as in N-O-T, because we're not that way. We have a lot here. How you doing, man? How's everything going this week so far for you?
What's up, brother? Good, as always. Happy to be here with you. Hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving weekend. I know we're already almost a week removed from that, which is wild, but the sports cycle doesn't stop. So happy to be here with you. We had some good games over the weekends. We got some good ones coming up, some big storylines, obviously, to get into. So excited to get into it with all of it with you on the NautZone here.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for a quick rundown, we're going to go through the game of the week. I mean, there's just no question about everybody wants to see this game. I don't care if you like these teams or not. The 49ers at the Eagles, supremacy in the NFC at hand. Joining us in a second is going to be our guest, managing editor at Sportsnaut over the NFL, David Kull, will be with us. So we're going to have him on in a second. Then we'll talk about the coaching carousel. Obviously, Frank Reich fired in Carolina. Everybody saw it coming. And I have some interesting thoughts that I want to share with you on that, Ryan, when we get to that segment. Because 11 games, the shortest stint of a head coach since 1970, right? So being a coach in the NFL, man, it's tough these days. And if you don't succeed right away, bad things happen. As you know, we talked about Brandon Staley last week, who's still there, but, we'll see what happens after the end of the year.
Not for long, probably.
Yeah, some saying about 10 coaches might be axed at the end of the year. And then third, we're going to talk about Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. Did the Saints make a mistake signing Derek Carr? Now that you look at what's happened, the performance with the Saints were picked to win that division going away easily. They lose a big game to the Falcons this past Sunday, and Derek Carr had a pick 6 in that game. So we're going to talk about that as he is a polarizing figure in the NFL. Of course, he was when he was with the Raiders, but it's an interesting thing because that division has turned out differently than anybody thought. But first, we are going to get to, as we mentioned, the game of the week, and that is the Eagles and the 49ers. And joining us to talk about that is, as I mentioned, our managing editor over the NFL at Sportsnaut. That is David Kull. He is such a cool dude, Ryan, that his name is cool. I mean,
well, it really is, actually. That's what my dad told me it was from the time I was born. He said, your last name's Cool. So here I am, Mr. Cool.
There he is, Mr. Cool. And so when they announced he was coming on board, Ryan, I'm like, that's pretty cool. And Larry, our executive editor, said, yeah, that is cool. So anyway, enough of the cool jokes.
I've heard all the cool jokes, so just bring them on.
You got them all.
Something I got to add. Scott, take that hat off real quick. Put you on the spot with hat hair. Like, I'm so jealous at the head of hair these two guys have compared to me over here. So at least you guys are living it up with great heads of hair, and I'm already balding over here.
Yeah, we'll take this. Ryan. Bald is beautiful, and yeah, we'll be the the foxes over here with the silver hair. We'll do that. But David, listen, I know we at Sportsnaut this week we have so much coverage of this game because everybody's interested in it. It is the marquee matchup, the game of the year. Could be a preview again to the NFC Championship game if both of these teams get there. And I want to start with you there because you look at the Eagles coming into this game. Just an incredible stat. Jalen Hurts has now 14-1 against teams with winning records. 14 in a row, by the way, after losing the first one. So you look at what the Eagles are doing. On the other side of it, the 49ers went in their little funk. They had a 3-game funk. Everybody was starting to question Brock Purdy, including me. And then what happens? Brock Purdy comes out looking squeaky clean, and he's lighting up the NFL. Just talk about the stage for this game and where these two teams are at first.
These are the two best teams in the league right now. I don't think anybody would question that. Maybe some Chiefs fans would have an issue with that. Maybe fans of a couple, the Cowboys, of course. but the Cowboys have lost to both of these two teams already. These are the top two teams right now. They're coming back. NFC Championship game, it'll be 304 days between the game in January and this game on Sunday back at the Link. So, I mean, a rematch of that game. We all know what happened in that game too. Brock Purdy goes down early in the first quarter, gets hit on the arm by Hassan Reddick, goes down. We find out that he has a torn UCL that requires surgery in the offseason. He's back now, coming back to where he got hurt. And with the war of words that's going on back and forth here, this is going to be a tremendous matchup. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's to me the thing I love about it is the trash talking. All this stuff is going on with this game.
Yeah, I mean, you have Hassan Reddick saying, "I'm hearing a lot of boo-hooing going on out there in the Bay Area, but they need to if they're talking about what ifs and all that. Well, come here and prove it. Come to our place again and prove that you're the better football team." So, and he has a point there.
Yeah, I'll just add the Niners love to whine, right? That's what we talk about on the show, right, Scott? Niners love to whine. We know that down here in LA. Rams fans know that well. There was all the boo-hooing after they lost to the Rams 2 years ago, and then there's boo-hooing after last year's loss, rightfully so, losing your quarterback and basically having CMC as your QB. So, just to poke the bear, I'll add that in.
No, that's great. I mean, you also have Deebo Samuel, who was asked earlier this week about his comments about James Bradbury, calling him trash. He was not taking anything back on that. So there's just a lot going on here, a lot more bad blood than what you would normally see for a regular season game, because this is not any typical regular season game. And what blows me away the most about it is that the Niners, with an 8-3 record, are going to Philly with a 10-1 record. They're the 3-point favorites.
Yeah. That is wild. Yeah. And it's I love seeing this too, David, because I feel like we haven't had an in-season, regular season rivalry for a little bit outside of divisions. Obviously, there's always division rivalry, but this is a cross-country rivalry, two blue bloods of the sport. So much history with both these fan bases, with these cities, and then obviously meeting in the playoffs last year helped. So what's interesting is I agree. I think these are the two best teams in football, but only one category is either of these teams in first, and that's total points against on defense. The Niners do rank first. Outside of that, most of them are not even in the top 5. So they're just categorically not necessarily the best, but when you look at collectively how they play complementary football, they obviously get the job done in all phases of the game, and they're both very well coached. So it's going to be a fun one, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And I've been amazed with the Eagles and how they've kind of shown that they have 9 lives. In the last 4 weeks in a row, they've been down at halftime, and they look dead in the water. Yet they come back. Jalen Hurts puts them on his back and leads them to a victory. It's pretty much unconscionable just what's happened here with the Eagles. I'm not sure that's going to happen again this week, but we'll find out. It's going to be there's going to be some drama, that's for sure.
Well, and I've said all along, David, that I really believed. I think there's 4 teams there at the top of the NFL, including these two, obviously, we're talking about because we're highlighting them. But I've always thought that coming into the year, I felt that the San Francisco 49ers had the most complete roster. Now, that doesn't always mean you're the best team, but it seems like they're in that period right now, as they were at the beginning of the year, where everybody's healthy, everybody's clicking on all cylinders. They're getting the performance out of all of those great players on offense and defense. And, of course, they, at the trade deadline, add another piece. Is that what you're seeing, too? You think this team is kind of peaking at the right time?
They are clicking. I mean, they came out of the bye week. Of course, they had lost 3 games in a row. You had already cited earlier about Brock Purdy, the struggles that he had. He also was missing some pieces, too. He was missing Deebo. He was missing Trent Williams as a left tackle. McCaffrey was a little banged up here and there, too. So they had that 3-game stretch there. They came out of the bye week and just since then have just been on a total high. I mean, that Jacksonville game, and then they came back. I think it was Tampa Bay the following week. But they've just been clicking on all cylinders on both sides of the ball. They've been fun to watch.
Yeah, certainly. It's and you know what? This is as I think Ryan said, which was great, which is, this is the type of rivalry you want to see in pro football. We see it in college. Ryan out in LA Football Network, obviously part of the Sportsnaut family, they do all the college football, and that those rivalries, Ryan, that type of stuff makes people like me, who I'm not a 49er fan, I'm not an Eagle fan, right? But I want to watch because of that bad blood or whatever you want to call it, and the chippy back and forth, it makes it more fun.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's what the fans want. It's why the NFL is king, right? Because in other sports, you don't necessarily have that game in and game out, week in and week out. Granted, there's just more games, period. So it's hard to, but it's the NFL when on a Thursday night, two teams go up and you get 20 million viewers because of those storylines. And I think there's just less games that helps. But having a rivalry like this start making a name for itself, I think is great. I think you get the two coasts, two very different cities in some regards, two very different fan bases, but very similar in terms of passion and in terms of national relevance. You have, one quarterback that is seemingly overrated, one quarterback that's MVP candidate. You have two defenses that are very outspoken and good at all ends and a very good defensive front going up against each other. You have, solid running games and an extremely good running game in San Francisco with CMC. You have two very different head coaches. Kyle Shanahan, kind of this offensive mastermind, but quieter. And, you have the outspoken Philadelphia Italian coach on the Eagles sideline. So it's just great storylines all around.
Did you just call Brock Purdy overrated? Is that what you did?
I'd say that's a storyline. I didn't say I said that. That's a storyline overrated.
No. Hey, and if that's your view, then we could have talked about that. We could have given you some therapy there, but it's okay. Yeah. David, I do know that tomorrow, everybody watching the show today, or if they're watching it later, I know tomorrow you got a big story coming out on this game, and it's 10 players to watch in this game. Let's go through two on each side, and then let's start with the San Francisco 49ers. You think about it, both these lineups are stacked. I mean, they're just stacked. You look at even the Eagles have Jalen Carter setting rookie records up front on defense. But when we get to the 49ers, talk to us about the two players, a little sneak preview for the folks here on the NautZone of your story tomorrow, talking about that. Who on the 49ers that we got to watch? Who has to just click 100% for this team to go to Philly and beat the Eagles on the road?
Well, I don't think there's any debate here. You have to start with the quarterback. You have to start with Brock Purdy. I mean, he's the one that's been engineering this offense. He makes them go. He's not a system quarterback, as a lot of people have said out there. He's got weapons, and he knows how to distribute the ball to those weapons. And the thing is with him, people do cite the weapons and the playmakers and all that, but with Jimmy Garoppolo, he wasn't getting them the ball down the field as Brock Purdy does. Brock Purdy's not a dink and dunk guy at all. If people look at the numbers and they see the yards per attempt, for Brock Purdy, he's delivering the ball down the field to guys like Ayuk, Kittle, Deebo Samuel. So this kid makes smart decisions with the football. He's doing everything right. If there was a redraft of the 2022 draft right now, I'm telling you, this guy would be a top 5 pick. So I would start with Brock Purdy.
Okay, so Brock Purdy, that makes sense, obviously. But who else on the 49ers? I mean, there's pick a name. It's like, to me, I'm like, there's so many guys on that roster. But when you look at the matchup with Philly, who's your second guy?
Well, the second guy I'm going to go with, I'm going with him not because of the chippiness this week, but because of how I feel his role will be in the game. And that's Deebo Samuel. Because I think that if you're the Eagles, if you're going to focus on one guy and try to take one guy away from the 49ers on that offense, it's got to be McCaffrey. You got to focus on McCaffrey coming out of the backfield, doing swing passes, getting the pitch, running between the tackles. You got to focus on McCaffrey. Well, what does that do? The 49ers have so many weapons on that team. I think what it does is it frees up a guy like Deebo to because Deebo you can use him out of the backfield. You could use him wide out. You can use him on reverses. You could use him in so many different ways. He's sort of like McCaffrey 2.0 in a way, because if you take McCaffrey out, okay, well, they got a guy almost just like that in Deebo, who's tough as nails when he gets the football in his hands too. He's one of the hardest guys to bring down in the league. So Deebo's my other guy. I think that they're going to try to take McCaffrey away, and that will leave openings for Deebo to work.
There you go. See, so now you got it. And that's the 49ers. What about the Eagles? Ryan, you want to ask David here what's going on with the Eagles? I mean, you're a West Coast guy, so we got to get that going.
Yeah. So what's up with the Eagles? You got obviously Jalen Hurts, I think, has had an up and down year. I don't know if he's necessarily in the MVP candidacy at this point, just because of some of the up and down play, but all he does is win. I mean, only one loss, played against some big teams in prime time, but you got that offensive line. Lane Johnson obviously been banged up. So who are you kind of honing in on this Eagles team?
Well, I'm going to start with Jalen Hurts, because yeah, you're right. You cited the fact that especially in the first half, he starts off games really slowly. He looks pathetic. He was 4 of 11 for 33 yards last week in the first half. And you're thinking, what in the world is going on with this guy? But in the second half, he comes out. I think he was 16 to 20 with all the touch. He had 4 touchdowns in the second half, accounting for with his legs and with his arm. So this guy's like a completely different player, and it's not how you start, it's how you finish, and that's what people will remember. So Jalen Hurts, to me, he has to play against the 49ers, though, a complete game. He cannot have a game like he had last week, because if he has that game in the first half last week against the 49ers, they could be looking at like a 3-touchdown deficit. So Jalen Hurts is my next guy. And actually, Ryan, you mentioned the other guy that I'd like to focus on. Earlier, I mentioned Hassan Reddick, and he's definitely important in this game. But I think Lane Johnson's huge because he's coming off an injury. He's been banged up with the groin. And guess who he has to face this week? Nick Bosa. So you got Nick Bosa, who lines up on the left defensive end. He'll be over the right tackle. That's Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson's one of the best one-on-one blockers in the NFL, statistically. And he's an all-pro. But this is going to be a battle to watch on that left side between those two guys. Usually Nick Bosa, you can't take him one-on-one, but if anybody can, it's Lane Johnson. But how suspect will he be with the groin?
Yeah, good point. It's any way you slice it, it's going to be a great matchup. All right, David, I'm going to put you on the spot there as your shiny Emmy looks over your shoulder, by the way. And you see Ryan, he's a West Coast guy. You see the UC Davis pennant and the 49ers. So
I saw that. Congrats to Dan Hawkins, who just announced his retirement from UC Davis. So,
love Dan Hawkins.
Great guy.
He's been there forever, seems like. Well, he took a couple detours, but he came back.
Yes. Yeah, had a great career. But David, put you on the spot. Who wins this game? And give me a margin of victory.
49ers 28, Eagles 27.
Wow.
I believe in fairy tale endings here, and Brock Purdy's going to come back. He's going to come back to where he got hurt last year. He's going to lead them down the field to a game-winning field goal. Jake Moody, who missed against the Browns earlier, had a chip shot field goal, or so it seemed, but it was in bad weather. He's going to get another opportunity here. He's going to knock it through 28-27 49ers.
Well, there you have it. Right from our NFL managing editor at sportsnaut.com. Make sure you check out David's work up on the site. Also, check out the game. There's videos, there's stories all week long about this matchup up on sportsnaut.com. David, thanks so much for being with us, and we'll talk to you again, man, real soon.
Let's do it again soon, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, David. Talk to you soon.
There you go. So Ryan, we got the big game in, right? So there we go. 49ers, Eagles. I actually like the 49ers too. As much as I know it's in Philly, and they had that amazing, it was fun to watch that comeback against the Bills, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And to his point, Hurts was so bad in the first half and then just scores 5 touchdowns in the second half. It was crazy. I just don't think, I think Philly's had that all year long. And as good as they can be, I think facing a team like the 49ers, even at home, it's going to be tough if they get behind it all, to David's point.
Yeah, I agree. I'm so torn on this. Like, I think this is like, it would almost benefit the Eagles to lose this game, kind of have some of that like humble pie, if you will, because they're riding so high, rightfully so. The big stat for me when looking at this is turnover differential. And obviously that's such a huge thing in terms of winning and losing in the NFL. And right now the Niners are plus 11, tied for first in the league. Granted, that's inflated a little bit because Seattle gift wrapped them quite a few turnovers in that Thanksgiving game, but they are what they are. And the Eagles are -2 right now, even with an only 1-loss record. They're -2 in the turnover differential. So if that becomes a factor, you obviously got to sway towards the Niners in this one, even with the home field advantage. If there is anything, I sway on the Eagles side. It is the kicking game. I think Jake Moody just has looked so inconsistent. I know David said he gets redemption at the end. I could see it going the other way where he has a shot at redemption and misses again to lose. But I think overall, based on just where these teams are at health-wise, where they are in terms of momentum, I think I would lean Niners as well. But it's close. It's a coin flip.
Yeah, and it might. I think the quarterback. He focused on the quarterback play there, and I think that's true. I mean, look, it's the quarterback's the most position in the league, most important position. But I also look at Hurts, and as bad as he can look as he did in the first half last week, he could just do so much with his legs. Purdy's a very good quarterback, throws the ball, throws dimes, and has been amazing over the last couple of weeks. But I just give that little bit of edge there. And so to your point about turnovers, if any of these quarterbacks go through any kind of turnover spell, that's gonna be trouble for them, because I just think, like you said, turnover. By the way, did you see that terrible Bears-Vikings game the other night? Did you see
Yes.
the first time in 50 years that a road team lost 2 fumbles and won the game? That's how bad of a game it was.
Yeah.
You're blowing through stats like that.
Well, and the Vikings had 4 interceptions and almost won the game. Like it was just a brutal in terms of sloppiness. It was not one for the ages. I guess it was one for the ages.
Yeah, nobody wanted it. It was crazy. And then finally the Bears at the end was like, okay, we're in position. We'll take it now. We'll do it.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. This week, obviously, big news. Frank Reich fired in Carolina as the head coach there after just 11 games. And that brings up the question, the coaching carousel starts now. Officially, there are 2 openings right now in the NFL, right? It's Carolina and it's Las Vegas. But the situation in Carolina, they get Bryce Young, first overall pick in the draft. They trade a buttload to Chicago to get him. And I just look at it this way. I want to get into 2 things. One is, how do NFL coaches survive unless they win in the first 2 years? I mean, Frank Reich couldn't even do it in the first year. And what part of the way ownership has changed in the NFL impacts this? And I'll get to that in a second. But just want to get your reaction first on Reich and how quickly the hook was there. 11 games.
Yeah, it's shocking. And I mean, not to get I'm not big in the investment game, but didn't Tepper make his money on shorting government stocks where you have to wait and be patient? And I'm not very patient in the NFL now. On his going to be his third coach, and he's on 3 coaches in his MLS team. So it's wild though. I mean, it's a team that, they traded all their assets to move up. So didn't have draft picks.
Right. They
traded away their one best asset on offense, DJ Moore. So you're having a rookie quarterback that has no one to throw to, no running game really to speak of. The defense has some key pieces like Brian Burns, but overall is in a rebuild. And you expect this coach to go out, and I don't even know what he expected. I mean, you can't expect this to be a playoff team with what they have, but I guess I understand you expect more than 1 win thus far. And I know the development of Bryce Young is probably, concern number 1, and he just has not looked as good as many had hoped. But again, that goes into your first question, like how much time do we give coaches? How much time do we give quarterbacks as well? And a good example of that, and they haven't obviously made it to the big game, but is the Buffalo Bills, who seemingly they paired their coach with their quarterback, or coach, had been given a year or whatever. Then they go get Josh Allen and say, okay, this is the marriage that we are agreeing to. We're knowing it's going to take some time. They haven't won the big game, but they've been one of the best teams in the NFL ever since making that marriage. Now, obviously, their head coach is on the hot seat as well, and we'll see if he makes it, but he's in, a much longer stint in coaching now. And you kind of have to do that unless the culture is so horrible, the team is quitting on him, the locker room is just completely severed, which I don't think, based on anything we've heard, was the case with Frank Reich, who I think is a very good coach and a very knowledgeable and a good man. So I think it's just a case of an ownership this is just, has happy feet and wants to move too quickly.
Yeah, and before we move on to ownership too, because I do want to talk about that, because you brought up David Tepper, and I think there's an important point there. But you look at Frank Reich, and I agree with you. Good football coach, Indianapolis. What happened there with the quarterback situation, all that stuff, sort of out of his control. It's kind of a wacky franchise to begin with. But then when he went to Carolina, and it was so quick, right? So he immediately got the job, right? And it made sense, right? Here's a guy who's worked with quarterbacks, but the quarterback he actually argued and fought for in Indy right after the Phillip Rivers experiment, which everybody knew was just a 1-year thing, was Carson Wentz. And Carson Wentz was a disaster, and I don't think Frank Reich recovered. I don't think he ever got over that fact. And I just looked at him in Carolina. It didn't seem like he was there. Like, it didn't seem, and that's not a criticism. I didn't see his heart all in it. And when your heart's not all in it, I think it's hard to keep a team together and be successful. Now, that's just my observation. I don't know if it's right, wrong. You could disagree with me. That's cool. Tell me what an idiot. I'm cool. But with Tepper, interesting point. And I interviewed, and you can check it out here on the Sportsnaut YouTube channel, which you must subscribe to, by the way. I talked to Armando Salguero, longtime NFL writer, now with Outkick, and I asked him about the situation, and he brought this up, and I want to get your reaction, Ryan, because in Los Angeles, you look at the Chargers. The Chargers are a family-owned team. Okay.
Yep.
And actually, they have family in every part of that organization, which is probably part of the problem. But nonetheless, and around the league, it used to be that way. The NFL teams were family businesses for the most part. It didn't mean that those families didn't make money elsewhere, but they were always kind of like a close family holding. That's now changed, right? You look around, there's still those ownership groups out there. But now there's guys like John Tepper, as you mentioned, made all his money managing hedge funds. In that business, in the corporate business, if you have 2 bad quarters in a row, i.e. you're a public company and you just don't do well, you're the CEO, guess what happens? You get fired. They don't give you 2 years. They give you 2 quarters. So it's a very short time. So I think he's running his football team and obviously his MLS team like a hedge fund.
Yep.
Now, is that right? I don't think so, because it's a different animal. And is profitability and yes, winning is the ultimate goal, but you can't tell me that, hey, we tore down the whole team. We traded away our best wide receiver. We got rid of everybody. We got rid of McCaffrey. We got every piece we had, we got rid of to rebuild. And then we bring you in after 11 games and I don't like you anymore, so I'm getting rid of you. It's wacky, but I think it's going to happen more with the type of owners now, like you see in Washington too, with the type of owners you have in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, Scott, just going back to the family owned real quickly. Before the Walter Penner Group bought the Broncos, the entire AFC West was all family owned. We look at the Davis family, the Hunt family, the Spanos family, and the Bolin family. It was all family owned. And then there's the one outsider, the big corporate family, if you will, the Walton Penner Group. But no, it's interesting. And this is just my observation. I could be way off. But when you look at what Tepper tried to do in Carolina, and this is such a copycat league, it's almost like he was looking 200 miles south at what happened in Jacksonville, right? Jacksonville was the dumpster fire with Urban Meyer. They go out, they bring in a veteran head coach who had won, but had been fired in Doug Peterson. They had the number 1 overall pick and drafted their quarterback, or they did the year prior, but he was going into year 2, first year with Peterson. And they turned that team around in 1 season and won a playoff game in 1 year under Doug Peterson. So it almost seemed like Tepper thought, okay, Frank Reich's won before. He won a Super Bowl as an OC under Doug Peterson at Philadelphia.
Yes.
I'm going to bring him in. He's a veteran presence. We're going to go get the number 1 pick to get our quarterback of the future, and we're going to get this thing turned around very quickly. And when you go 1-10, I'm not saying he should have fired him, but I think he thought, they did it down there. Why can't we do it up here? What's going on? What's happening? So right. I think it's everything you said about the corporate mindset of not having 2 bad quarters, but then also the copycat mindset of like, well, if this team can do it, why can't we do it? We clearly just don't have the right coach, and you're just going to see that more and more.
Yeah, and you're so right about the NFL being a copycat league. I mean, you see it in everything, whether it's offensive scheming, whether it's coaching decisions, whether it's what they do with marketing and I mean, they all follow one another and what's working at the moment, which I understand. If it's successful, why wouldn't you try to mimic it? But at the same time, it doesn't always work because you have lots of issues like talent. Ooh, imagine that. You have talent. You have to have talent to win. Can you imagine? So yeah, it's interesting. And I think you see some of these coaching situations. I mean, Washington, Ron Rivera is gone. I think Chicago, Eberflus is gone, especially if they can get Harbaugh, which I think that's the most likely place for him to land. Vegas, we'll see. I still think they'll go a different direction, not within the interim coach. So there's going to be a lot of changes. The estimates are around 10 people changing, which is crazy. That's a lot. Every year there's 2 to 5.
Third of the league.
But 10. Yeah, so
third
keep
of the
your
league.
eyes. What's that?
I said that's a third of the league. It's wild.
It's insane.
So let me ask you this, Scott, real quick before we move on. Sorry to cut you off. Okay. But I did an article yesterday on LFBNetwork.com with the trending news, and I know how fans would think, but let me ask you. I basically said, which owner would you rather have? You only have 2 options: Dean Spanos or David Tepper. Those are your 2 options. Complete polar opposites in terms of everything we talked about. One being a billionaire hedge fund owner that bought his team, the other being family owned and yada yada. One being very impatient, one being way too patient. And so fans, obviously, I think would. You could maybe Carolina fans would feel differently, but I know Chargers fans would feel one way, covering the team for long enough and living here long enough. But from a head coaching perspective, when you look at these 2 jobs, because seemingly Staley is going to be gone. There's been reports that unless they make a miraculous something happens, essentially making the playoffs and winning, he's basically out. So you're going to have the Carolina job and the Chargers job open. You have one owner that has a lot of money, one owner that is seemingly cheap. However, which job as a coach would you value? I'll let you go first, then I'll counter.
It's a great question, because if I'm basing it just on the owner, not considering roster, all that kind of stuff, I would go with Tepper because of his desire to win. And I think, and again, I'm a little biased, Ryan. I grew up in San Diego, and the Spanos name is not highly spoken of in my household. I'll put it that way, right?
Yeah, not in that whole city.
Yes, exactly. So I get that. And the Spanos family, I mentioned it earlier, family business is fine, but when you have your grandson running scouting and he doesn't know anything about scouting and things like that, I would be worried about that. Just because every corner I turn, I'm going to have a Spanos family member doing something that some of them might be qualified, others might not be. Yep. But now if you talk about roster, would I put up with Spanos to go if I'm a top line coach and inherit? You have to have a franchise quarterback. Now, could Bryce Young be a franchise quarterback? Absolutely. He's picked first all in the draft. We don't know yet. But with Justin Herbert. Mm-hmm. So if I'm a coach in the NFL, I'm going where the quarterback is. I'll deal with all the other crap, and they're cheap or whatever, but I would make sure that I have commitment to what I need, and I would go where the quarterback is.
Yeah. I mean, roster for sure. And LA is getting a brand new, beautiful facility here in El Segundo. And there's a bunch of factors that I think go into that. It's so hard because you have one side that, okay, it seems on the outside that Tepper is willing to do whatever it takes to win and will basically give you, whatever you need to be successful. At the same side of that, it also seems like Tepper's very involved. There's a story of him literally going to Frank Reich and saying, I want you to run this play. I saw another team run this play. We need to implement this play in the playbook. The Spanos family, to your point, they're involved. They have fingers everywhere, but they're not exactly involved in the coaching. I think they let their coaches do that. And the other side is if you're, say, a new coach, you basically are guaranteed to write out your contract with the Spanos because they're not going to pay to fire you and then pay someone else. You're guaranteed to make it your whole contract, whereas as Tepper to show, you might get 10 months to turn that thing around. So there's no right answer. I think they're both – you don't want to play for either of them, coach for either of them, but interesting which one would be more favorable.
It's like an enigma, though, because it's like if you go to Carolina and you get fired after 11 games like Frank Reich did, I think they said Frank Reich will for the next 3 years make $25,000 a day.
Yeah,
I'll take that as a consolation prize. And versus the Chargers, they'll let you lose and look terrible and just let you play out the string because they don't want to pay anybody else any more money. So it's a weird dynamic for both. All right, we're going to switch gears now, and I want to talk about. I brought this up because it's interesting. Our good friends down in New Orleans, especially those that I know that cover the Saints. Did a lot of interviews with them last year as Derek Carr was moving from Las Vegas to New Orleans. They were very excited about Derek Carr. They felt like Derek Carr was the missing piece because we've been hearing for years, especially from Derek Carr's family, including his brother David, who's in the NFL media, that all he needed, he's been on all these bad Raider teams, never had a defense in Oakland/Las Vegas, which was true. All he needs is a defense. Right? Because he had offensive weapons in those places, but he didn't have defense. So now he's going to a team with a very good defense. So he gets to New Orleans. Not much has changed, Ryan. Not much has changed. You look at Derek Carr, 65% completion percentage, 2,500 yards, 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Always has good numbers. Derek Carr always has good numbers. But he's 29th. The Saints are 29th in the red zone as far as TDs go, 42%. Derek Carr has a 44% completion rate in the red zone. He has not had 27 touchdowns in a season, which is, obviously a big number, since 2016, where he was almost, and in some eyes, an MVP candidate and broke his leg before the Raiders bowed out of the playoffs. And he's averaging 6.8 yards per play, which is his lowest since 2017. So it's just interesting because now those same people are coming back to me and saying, dude, what you said was right about that. Everybody likes the guy, but it doesn't seem like his team likes him enough that they rally behind him when he got injured. And thank God he's okay. I don't wish injury on anybody. But when he came back, his team, the interview with Alvin Kamara was like, are you happy you getting your quarterback? And he was kind of like, yeah. So it wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement. Did they make a mistake signing him?
Yeah, I mean, he's such, and way better than me, so I won't try to speak too analytical, but I thought it was a mistake from the get-go. I mean, I don't think it was a player that all of a sudden, it was kind of like the Raiders going and getting Jimmy G. Like, you're not going to get instrumentally better with that quarterback. And in reality, like, I don't want to sound, this might be a hot take, but I don't know if he's that much better than Jameis Winston, who's your backup. Like, I don't know why you don't, maybe put all your resources into what he can do, being a number 1 overall pick, and obviously has a great arm. Obviously the turnovers were an issue, but he threw for 5,000 yards the last time he was a starter. So I don't think it was a great move from the get. I personally have always, liked Derek Carr, even though he played for the Raiders, and I've covered different teams and I always kind of rooted for him. But for whatever reason, there always seemed to be that disconnect between him and the locker room. And even when you look at polarizing quarterbacks like Russell Wilson, who obviously there's tons of conversations about him, but even in his time in Denver, the players seemingly, there was some stuff on sidelines, but overall they always spoke still highly of him. So hearing that about Derek Carr is very interesting that, they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever. I mean, we'll see. He's our starter as the coach says.
Yeah. Well, I had a colleague bring up to me last night. He said, do I think, because I asked him the question, I said, we're doing a show tomorrow, I'm going to ask this question. And he said, you could look at it as a mistake, but what else were the Saints going to do? Like, who else could they have brought in at that point? Like, what veteran could they go sign? There was nobody really available. We saw the names available and where they went. Baker Mayfield, would he have made the Saints much better? Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, he's had a nice little run here and there with Tampa Bay, but is he better overall as Derek Carr? No. So in some ways, I think it was a mistake, but in other ways, I see why they did it. Dennis Allen knew him. He coached him in Oakland, so it made sense there. But it's not the future, and I agree with you. I rather start Jameis Winston. He's going to turn over the ball. There's no question.
Yeah.
But is the upside enough, and the fact that you have that defense, is the upside enough from Jameis to go out and maybe give you a better chance to score points, which the Saints have struggled with all season long?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they haven't been able to score at all. They've lost many games in that under 18 point threshold just because they've scored 15 or 14 or whatever. So, you make a good point. Like, what else could they have done? And at least they were being proactive. But I think it would have been wise just to say, okay, we know. I mean, unless they truly believe Derek Carr was going to be their quarterback for the next 5 years, which maybe they did. But I would have just said, okay, let's start with Jameis. Let's see if he gives us anything that we can use for the future. If not, we got a great draft coming up with a lot of quarterbacks, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. And again, I still don't think it was quote unquote a mistake to sign him. I do think it was to give him the terms and the money. So I'll put it that way now, but he wasn't going to take less. I know other people were interested in him, I think. So, but it's just crazy how there was a lot of, when he was a Raider, there was a lot of fighting back and forth on people, just this, and you hate Derek Carr and I love Derek Carr. And it turns out that everything he was in Vegas, for the most part, he's continuing to do as far as tendencies and whatnot, which makes sense. You've been in the league 9 years, like you are who you are, right? You're not going to suddenly just overnight change and become something you're not.
And the interesting, sorry to cut you off. The interesting thing is, and I know obviously Sean Payton's not there, Joe Lombardi's not there, but seemingly it's still the same system with Pete Carmichael as their OC, who was the OC for Sean Payton his entire years there. And that system that was ran so beautifully by Drew Brees, you actually would think Derek Carr would be able to run very well. I mean, it was very, I always hate saying dink and duck because it sounds disrespectful, but it was very, short, easy passes, not turnover worthy plays. It's not super explosive. You kind of wear defenses down. And then when they sink in, then you hit him for the big play. It seemed like Derek Carr would fit perfectly in that. Now, maybe Pete Carmichael has tweaked it a bit since he's the lone man calling the shots now, and he's the one play calling, because even when he was the OC for many years, obviously Sean Payton was calling plays, and even Joe Lombardi was giving play calling as the QB coach, not Pete Carmichael. So maybe that is different, but just based on the sole system, you would have thought Derek Carr would have fit in there beautifully.
Absolutely. And I think that's why fans and some of the people who cover the team thought that it all seemed to make sense. But having watched him for 7 seasons or 6 seasons, the tendencies are just there. It's not, he's a top 15 quarterback. Nothing wrong with that. But the limitations certainly there, and I think New Orleans is finding that. All right, we got a couple minutes left, Ryan. This is where we kind of just throw things out there that might be on our mind. I'm going to let you go first in this week after Thanksgiving, and as we roll towards the holidays and towards some big games in the NFL. What's on your mind, my friend?
Well, I don't have a big soapbox moment like last week, but hope maybe you do. Maybe you can counter with a nice soapbox moment. But I just want to give a shout out. We've mentioned him a few times, so I don't want to harp too much on it. But shout out to the Denver Broncos, won 5 straight now, seemingly a dumpster fire. Everyone was like, "Wow, is Sean Payton even going to make it through his first year?" That's the same thing. Like David Tepper, new ownership group in Denver. They want to win quickly. They have all the money. They don't care about paying coaches too much. They were already paying Sean Payton. They didn't care. Started off 1-5. The defense was horrible. He's stuck behind his D coordinator in Vance Joseph. They've been a top 10 unit since week 6. They're one of the top units in turnovers. The offense is still not necessarily explosive, but they're playing smart football. They put up 24 points against the vaunted Browns defense. So seemingly, and I've said that word many times now, I've realized, but it is looking like a group that is not just playing better, but I would say a true playoff contender. I mean, they're 6-5 right now, sitting in a relative playoff spot. Still have a tough game against the Lions. And I think they have one other that I'm blanking on right now, but they get the Chargers twice, which that looks like that should be a much easier game, seeing how things are going out here in LA. And they're already done playing the Chiefs. They've already beat the Bills. They beat the Vikings. They beat the Browns. So they're definitely a potential playoff team. And I just think hats off to Sean Payton, hats off to that locker room for sticking with it after starting 1-5. And it just shows you, maybe our theme of the day, Scott, is patience. It shows you what patience can do, even though it's only been in one season. When you start off 1-5, that requires a lot of patience. And now 6-5, they're a viable football team.
They're coming on strong. And like I said, even if for some reason they don't get, because I think you're going to have to win 10 games in the AFC. That's just, I keep thinking that. Even if they don't win 10 games, they're going to spoil somebody's playoff chances. I'll put it that way. If you look at the schedule they have, including the Chargers, if the Chargers start to win a little bit and start to put something together, twice. So they have an opportunity to do that. Mine is related to a piece I had up on Sportsnaut today, actually. And that is, you ready for this, Ryan?
Yes, sir.
The MVP of the NFL is not Jalen Hurts.
Mm-hmm.
The MVP of the NFL, and you can't convince me otherwise, he won't win it, but he is Tyreek Hill. That's my.
They're going to say Dolly Parton, but I like Tyreek Hill. That's good.
How about her? 77 years old, man.
Good, yeah. Good for her.
Absolutely,
good for her.
100%. But Tyreek Hill, is there any player in the NFL? Look, quarterback's the most important position. 15 of the last 16 MVP awards went to quarterbacks, including the last 10 in a row. So it's going to be a quarterback again. But it shouldn't be. If there was one year, the last year, 2012, was not a quarterback. It was Adrian Peterson, who beat out Calvin Johnson, Megatron, who had an amazing year. He set the record that Tyreek Hill is going to break this year for reception yards is that year. But there is no other guy in the NFL that every team fears more than Tyreek Hill. You can double team him. You can do all kinds of weird zone. You can't contain him, right? I mean, he's always able to find an opening. And I know for a small little wide receiver, but with that speed, he just tips the field. Teams have to account for him all the time, and they move him around. What Mike McDaniel has done in that offense is incredible. And I just think that if you look at the award and how it's worded, how somebody changes the whole scope of a team, I think it's Tyreek Hill.
It's a great take, and I agree with you. I'll be the first to say, Scott, when he left KC, when he was traded, I said he will miss KC and Pat Mahomes more than KC will miss him.
Absolutely.
Because I, not well, but I played receiver in high school, and the wide receiver position is the most reliant position on everyone else. You have to have the quarterback, you have to have the play call. Like you could be as good as you want and never get thrown the ball. So I was like, okay, he's going from Pat Mahomes to Miami. He'll still be good, but he's not going to be the Tyreek Hill that he was there. And I was dead wrong. I mean, everyone talks about Mike McDaniel saving Tua Tagovailoa. Tyreek Hill has saved Tua Tagovailoa because he underthrows on almost every play, and Tyreek Hill still goes up and gets it and takes to the house. So I completely agree. I think he is the most dangerous player. He's the face of that offense, and he's deservedly, hopefully, if he breaks the record, it'll be embarrassing if he does not get the MVP. I mean, it should be a shoo-in if he breaks that record.
Yeah, in the piece today, I had a quote that Jerry Rice did a interview with Yahoo, because Jerry Rice in 1987 scored 22 touchdowns in 12 games, and which should have been an MVP winner and didn't either. And he even said, I think he's got a chance. It might be a long shot, but I think he does. And I just think that the 50 voters from the Associated Press that vote on MVP, they won't vote a wide receiver unless the Dolphins somehow just go nuts the rest of the way. But they have been going nuts because they have the number one offense. But the numbers are incredible. And I had a reader up on X.com today say, well, is it Tua helping Hill or is it Hill helping Tua? And you just answered that question. And I agree with you 100%. Because it makes it available. Tua's a good quarterback, and at one time he might have been an MVP candidate too. But the fact that this guy gets open and yards after the catch, incredible. So that's my parting shot.
And last point, and it's if you look at the numbers and you look at Kansas City, yes, they won the Super Bowl last year. Hats off. I'm not taking anything away from that. But they weren't like the dynamic offense they were in years past. They won because they were more of a complete team. The defense was a lot better. And now you get into this year, they're not even like a good offense. They're a great defense now with a competent offense. And so it just shows how valuable he was.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just, he's a dynamo, and it changes the whole scope of how you game plan. And any coach will tell you that. And so, that was it. But all good. Again, see, we get through all some cool subjects here on the NautZone.
David, cool subjects.
Any cool. And by the way, leave comments on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, by the way. If you don't subscribe, we will send big people to your house with ill intent. No, I'm just kidding. We will. Thank you for your subscription. Hit the notifications bell too. Every time we go live, you'll get a notification. But we are here at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific every Wednesday. So you can count on that too. You can also catch it up on the channel if you miss it. And the audio version is available too. Ryan, what do you got coming up? I know so much going on right now on the West Coast with football. I mean, the big Pac-12 championship game, Washington, Oregon, LA too. A lot of decisions being made. We saw what happened at UCLA. Now USC's got some openings they got to fill. What's happening in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, a lot of stuff as always. Looks like Chip Kelly's returning as the UCLA UCLA coach, So a lot of conversation there. USC still hasn't announced their new defensive coordinator, which I assume will be done by this Friday, but we'll see what happens there. And the transfer portal opens December 4th, so that's always busy. And then we talked about the Chargers a little bit, and you got the Rams. The Rams are the best team in LA at 5-6, which is crazy to say with that roster. So the Rams are still given a puncher's chance at making the playoffs, and they came off a big 37-14 win over the Cardinals. So always stuff going on.
Yep, awesome. That's great. And do us a favor, make sure you head up to sportsnaut.com. Any NFL news you want, any college football, of course, championship week, and you could check out LA Football as well, network for great college coverage as well there too. So make sure you do that. And again, I have to remind you, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notifications bell so you know when we're live. Ryan, we will get back together next week and discuss more NFL news and views, man. I appreciate it. Have a great week, and we'll see you then.
You too, man. Always a pleasure. Take care.
All right. For everybody here at Sportsnaut, we thank you guys so much, and we will see you up on the site